The lighting is all fucked up today. It's probably the best we're going to get it. Yeah, fine. It's a bit washed out, but that's okay. I'm starting the video early because it's not at the usual time, and I don't know if people know that I'm live, so here I am. Oh, hello, people. I'm not dressed as a caricature of a French person this time because I was tired, but I hope we can all still enjoy ourselves. Can we get a bonjour going in chat? Hi, Nick. How are you? Hi, Jesse. Gotta pull up the story on my phone. I had my friend Emma come over today, and Niobe was not happy. She came right inside and just yowled at Emma like she was trying to warn me about a ghost. It was a really weird thing to do. Did you? You say mistake, so I'm guessing it didn't go well. God, my hair's enormous. I need a haircut. Look at this. It's just it's starting to clip through all the other textures in my house. I have a few of us here. I'm going to text Evelyn because she missed the last one. I should have texted before I started the video. That's future viewers' problem, not mine. Pimpernel. It is perfect time. That's very nice. Danny. Yeah, speaking to people in their first language or like a language they speak really well is so nerve-wracking. I did it once in the hospice shop, and the lady was really nice. Come on. Do you want to see your fans? Do you want to see your people? Evelyn says she'll be there in 15 minutes and not to wait. Come on, Flora. Come on. They subscribe to see you, my love. Oh, okay. You don't get to see her right now. Come here. Come on. If you don't sit up here now, she's going to leap up right at the worst time. Anyway, the Scarlet Pimpernel, Phi So Percy is the name of the story. As we know, the Scarlet Pimpernel is basically Batman, but just... I was going to say Batman, but just for rich aristocrats, but isn't that just Batman? And his human self is called Sir Percy Blakeney, who is a Bruce Wayne type. No, nobody would think of him as the Pimpernel because he loves tailored clothing or something. Hey, Josh. And he's got two like Robins, I guess. Anthony Fawkes, and I forget the name of the other one because he hasn't come up yet. So they rescued a family of aristocrats, the Scarlet Pimpernel and his friends. So Lozette, hello, my love. Told you. A revolutionary official. What's up, John? Has hatched a plan to catch the Scarlet Pimpernel with Chauvelin, the revolutionary who is the Scarlet Pimpernel's enemy. Tony Millionaire told me his secret identity once. I don't know what any of that means, but I love it. So they've captured this aristocratic family with the head of the family is like the most noble and wonderful man who ever lived, and his wife is very sick, and their daughter is very young and beautiful. So they want to draw out the Scarlet Pimpernel. Fair. The plan starts, and then a bunch of peasants from the village just behind them are whipped into a frenzy by some strangers from out of town, march on the ambush because they think that Lozay is going to steal the 10,000 francs and reward money. The Drinky Crow Show on Adult Swim. I'll have to do that. Thank you. So Lozay is like, well, fuck, that's... Cannot believe you guys just did that. You've ruined everything. At least we still get to send these aristos to the guillotine. So, because the revolutionaries love to kill innocent people, and there is no way that the family involved could possibly have had anything to do with why people are so very, very, very angry during the French Revolution. Also, Lozay used to work for the Count, the head of the family they're going to guillotine. Which makes his betrayal so much worse. Because, that guy was a really good master to him. Nowadays, we do not think this way. Actually, a lot of people think that way. Gross. So we're nearly 10 minutes in, not quite. Can't believe these lights. That's the same, just darker. I guess that is what light does, but that's better. So that's our cast of characters. The Pimpernel, aka Sir Percy Blakeney. Andrew Fawkes, his Robin to his Batman, aka no name, he doesn't get a special name. Chauvelin, their enemy, and Lozay, also their enemy, a revolutionary. And pretty soon now we can make a start. Oh no, we can't because I haven't done the tweet. Whoops. Live now. Such a mess having to retweet and untweet. Okay. So much of it. Got 3 people. I'm pretty sure we had more last time, but it was at a different time of day. If 3 is what we have, 3 is what we have, and I'm happy with that. Nine minutes. Close enough. Okay, so I think I've skipped forward a chapter. No, I haven't. Okay, so Desez is the family that's going to be guillotined. They prayed God might interfere in the same way. Hi, JS May. Sorry to call you JS May. 90. Poor Hector de Sez himself had not much hope on that score, this being rescued by the Scarlet Pimpernel. This is just the last couple paragraphs of the last chapter. He was a pious man, it's true, but his piety consisted in resignation to the will of God. Nor would he have cared much if God had only chosen to strike at him. It was the fate of his invalid wife that wrung his heart, and the future of his young daughter that terrified him. I'm not going to use this voice the whole way through, I'm just recapping. He had known the citizen commissary practically all his life. Losey was not a bad man, really. Perhaps he had got his head rather turned through his rapid accession from his original situation as packer in the de Sez house of business, with a bed underneath the counter in the back shop, to that of chief of section in the rural division of the department of Seine-et-Oise, with an official residence in Mantes, a highly important post, considering its proximity to Paris. So condescending. It's so mean. Like, Losey might not be a bad guy. He's just had his head turned by too much power for, a peasantral brain. A villain brain. But all the same, Losey was not a bad man and must have kept some gratitude in his heart for all the kindness shown to him by the de Sez family when he was a lad in their employ. I'm sure the kindness is what he remembers. But in spite of any appeal, Losey remained stony-hearted. Blah, 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 blah. He's like, please help me. Just a denim shirt. Kmart. 2016, maybe. Denim PJs would be awesome. Losey indicated that the interview was now at an end. He ordered the prisoner to be taken back to Moisson and there to be kept in the cells until the following day, when arrangements would be complete for conveying the de Sez family under escort to Paris. Also, hello Liz Windsor, welcome. Part 4. The following day was market day at Moisson, and at first Losey had been doubtful whether it would not be best to wait another 24 hours before carrying through his friend Chauvelin's project. The dawn, however, broke with ideal conditions for it. A leaden sky, a tearing wind, and torrents of rain, alternating with a thin drizzle. We've gone back like 3 chapters. I remember this. I was like, wait, are they trying to do the exact same plan again? Using the exact same words? I apologize deeply. I'm désolé. Right. Scarlet, the mob of villagers comes in. They fuck up the plan. Everyone's upset with each other. No one can find the instigators of this fight. And sorry about that. Okay. Right, okay, so at the end of all that hullabaloo, I forgot about this bit, the mob ran off to get Losey and Chauvelin and I guess kill them because they thought they were going to keep the ransom money for themselves. And they think that the Scarlet Pimpernel is among them. So, Captain Raffet says, two of you troopers are sufficient to bring those rascals along. You, Corporal, and 2 men come with me. Citizen Losey and his friend are being murdered, even now. He hurried down the road, followed by the corporal and 2 men of the gendarmerie, whilst those that were left behind saw to it that the perpetrators of all this additional outrage and pother were duly garroted and started on their way. Doesn't seem lethal in that sense. Maybe it had a different sense, I don't know. To them, Raffet shouted a final, 3 of you remain to guard the prisoners and make ready for an immediate start when we return. Then he disappeared round the bend in the road. So, those keeping track at home, That's the whole mob chasing after Chauvelin and Lozay, and Captain Raffet taking all of the soldiers that were meant to guard the aristos, apart from 3, away from the aristocrat family, running down the road towards the nonsense. Yeah, nowadays we're a little bit more sophisticated with our plots, but Part 8. The shouting had ceased as Raffet and his troops hurried along. Indeed, at first he might have thought that his ears had deceived him, had not that agonized call for help still risen insistently through the gloom. He searched the darkness, and suddenly a sight greeted him by the roadside, which caused his hair to stand up on his head. At first this seemed nothing but a bundle lying half in and half out of the ditch in the mud, with the drip drip from the trees making a slimy puddle around it. It was from this bundle that the calls for help and the curses proceeded. It was appalling, almost unbelievable, for there were the chief of section in the rural division of the department of Seine-et-Oise, Citizen Lozay, and his friend from Paris, whom Captain Raffet knew as Citizen Chauvelin, a man who stood very high in the estimation of the government, and they were lying in a muddy puddle in the ditch like a pair of calves tied together for market. Raffet might have disbelieved his eyes had it not been for the language which Citizen Lozay used all the while that the rope which bound him was being cut by the corporal. That's true. Citizen Kane is about the French Revolution. I haven't seen it. I'm not going to. Let me have my assumptions. Thank the Lord, Raffet exclaimed fervently, that you are safe. I'll have them flayed alive, the rascals, Lozay exclaimed in a voice rendered feeble and hoarse with much shouting, as well as rage. The guillotine is too mild a death for such miscreants. They attacked me, citizen captain. Would you believe it? Me, chief of section in the rural gendarmerie. Have you ever heard of such an outrage? They shouted at us from behind. My friend and I were riding along quite slowly, and we had just turned into the bridle path from the road. What else did you turn into? Sorry. We heard the cart and all the shouting, but we thought that they were just a pack of drunken oafs returning from market. So we paid them no heed, not even when anon we heard that on the road the cart had drawn up. And chancing to glance back at that moment, I saw these louts jumping helter-skelter out of the cart. And the next moment they were on us, the lot of them. 10 or a dozen of them they were, the rogues. The miserable scoundrels, Raffet exclaimed fervently. They dragged us out of our saddles, Lozay continued. They beat us about the head. Name of a name. And all the while they kept on shouting, Traitor, traitor, give up the English spy to us. In vain did we try and protest. They would not hear us, and what could we do against a dozen of them? Don't know if you heard that, but Flora meowed. She doesn't like the French language, so then maybe there are too many French words in this for her. She's a peculiar cat. Then, finally, they bound us with ropes, wound our cravats about our mouths so that we could scarcely breathe, and listed us into that jolting cart, where we lay more dead than alive while it was driven by a lout at breakneck speed. That's why we don't wear cravats anymore. Have no fear, citizen, Raffet put in forcefully. Their punishment shall be exemplary. I have no fear, Lozay retorted dryly, for I'll see to their punishment myself. The scamps, the limbs of Satan, but I'll teach them. There we lay, citizen captain, at the bottom of the cart. My friend, citizen Chauvelin, who wore the tricolor scarf of office round his middle, the French flag colours, and I, chief commissary of the district, and those ruffians dared to wipe their shoes on us. So we drove for 1.5 kilometres through the forest. Then presently the cart drew up, and all those louts jumped down like a pack of puppies and ran away up the hill with shouts that would wake the dead. The last I remember, for in the jolting and my cramped position I had partly lost consciousness, was that my friend and I were lifted out of the cart as unceremoniously as we had been thrust into it. We were carried up the road some little way and then thrown into the ditch by the roadside, in the mud, just where you ultimately found us, and our cravats were loosened from round our mouths. Immediately we started screaming for help, but there was such a din going on up the road that we felt the sound of our voices could not possibly reach you. Fortunately, in the end, you did hear us. Or maybe we should have perished of cold and inanition. Malediction! Raphael swore viciously. And you might have been attacked by those cursed English spies while you lay helpless there. We thought we heard them and their battle cry, and hurried to your assistance. He turned and shook his fist with another savage oath at the gang of prisoners which had just come into view. 10 dozen. Sobered and chastened, they allowed themselves quite meekly to be dragged along by a couple of soldiers. Some of them were able to walk, and were made to do so with the aid of vigorous kicks if they flagged, whilst the others, those who had sustained wounds or were otherwise helpless, had been hoisted up, none too gently, on the shoulders of their comrades in misfortune. Altogether they looked a sorry lot. Raphael smiled grimly at the sight of them, whilst Losey fell to cursing and anathematizing them viciously. Sorry. I need lip balm. This was a gift from a friend. It magically changes colour from no colour to very slightly pink. The point is the magic. And it tastes like peppermint. Chauvelin alone showed no emotion about that or about my lip gloss. As soon as the rope that held him had been severed, he had sat up on the broken tree stump, staring straight out before him into the mist, and meditatively stroking his sore wrists and arms. It seemed as if some secret thought had the power to keep his wrath and indignation in check. Nor did he as much as glance up when the procession of soldiers and prisoners came into view. Before his semi-consciousness, there floated a vague vision which he was striving to recapture. When first these abominable louts had thrust him and Losey in the bottom of the cart, and he lay there bound and gagged, nursing his stupendous wrath and hopes of revenge, he had become... Can we just change certain phrases to nursing your stupendous wrath? I just think it's... I think it's a good one. He had become aware that the driver, who still sat aloft just above him, had suddenly turned and, leaning over, had peered into his face. It had only been a very brief glance. The next moment the man was sitting up quite straight again, and all the Chauvelin saw of him was his back, with the great breadth of shoulders and general look of power and tenacity. But it was the brief vision of that glance that Chauvelin now was striving to recapture. The blue-grey eyes with their heavy lids that could not be disguised, and the mocking glance which had seemed to him like rasping metal against his exacerbated nerves. And suddenly he called to Raphael, "The driver and the cart, where are they?" The captain's sharp eyes searched the mist that was rising in the valley. "Down at the bottom of the hill," he said. "The driver seems to be on the box. I shall want him to drive these rascals back to Mont." "Send him to me at once," Chauvelin broke in curtly. Yeah, anytime the writing gets very horny for a dude, it's got to be the Pimpernel, right? Chauvelin remembered how sexy the stranger's shoulders were. "I've seen them before," he thought. Raphael gave the necessary orders, although inwardly he chafed at this new delay. The prisoners slowly continued their way, and Chauvelin waited, expectant. For what? He could not have told you. He certainly did not expect to be brought face to face with his old enemy. And yet, But whatever vague hopes he might have entertained were dissipated soon enough by an exclamation from Raffet. Charles Marie, what in a dog's name are you doing here? He's the guy who was in the first video. They talked about what a piece of shit he was. No, second video. Yeah, like a known coward. They really did him. In a weak, querulous voice, rose in reply. He told me I was to run along and drive the cart back to Mont for him. He? Queried Raffet sharply. Who? I don't know, citizen captain, replied Charles Marie. Who ordered you to leave the diligence and your horses? I don't know, citizen captain, protested the unfortunate Charles Marie. It's God's truth. I don't know. You must know why you're not sitting in the box of the diligence. Yes, I know that, for I scrambled down as soon as I saw Gaspard fall on you, citizen captain. Why did you scramble down? Because the horses were restive. At the first pistol shot they started rearing, and I had a mighty task to hold them. Fortunately, someone came and gave me a hand with them. What do you mean by someone came? Who was it? Come in on the horses. It was a big problem back in the day. He was a drover from Ancourt, citizen captain, and so he knew all about horses. And how could I keep 4 terrified horses quiet, all by myself? You miserable fool. All very well, citizen captain, but I never was a fighting man, and I don't like these pistol shots all about me. One of them might have caught me, I say, and it was only right that I should find cover somewhere, lest I be hit by mistake. You abominable coward, Raffet rejoined savagely. Yeah, most people love being shot, apparently. But all that does not explain how you got here. Well, citizen, it was like this. The drover from Ancourt saw that I was not altogether happy, and he said to me, There'll be more fighting presently when the English spies come to attack. I said nothing at first. All I could do was to groan, for as I say, I'm not a fighting man. I went out of the army because I was too ill to fight, and my mother... Oh, never mind about your mother now. What happened after that? He said to me, You go and get on the seat of the cart which is up the road. It's my cart. You can drive it back to Mont and leave it and my horses at the posting inn, where they know me. I'll look after these horses for you, and when the fighting's over, I'll drive the diligence to Paris. No one will be any the wiser, and I don't mind a bit of a fight. I can do a bit of fighting myself. Well, Charles Marie went on dolefully, there didn't seem much harm in that. I could see he knew all about horses from the way he handled them, but I'm no fighting man, and when I was engaged to drive the diligence from Moisson to Paris, I was not told there would be any fighting. So you turned your back on the diligence like a coward and crept along here. I didn't creep, citizen. I followed you when... Pardi! Raffet broke in with an oath. Another of you that will not escape punishment. If I had my way, the guillotine will be busy in Mont for days to come. When the only tool you have is a guillotine, every problem starts looking like a person. It's peach iced tea. No one suggests that I'm drinking pee. That's weird. I feel like no one was going to. There was nothing for it now but to allow Charles Marie to drive the cart back to Mont, since its owner had probably seized an opportunity by now of taking to its heels. Poor Raffet was worn out with the excitement of the past half hour, and bewildered with all the mystery that confronted him at every turn. Vaguely he felt that something sinister lurked behind this last incident recited to him by Charles Marie, but for the moment he did not connect it with the possible manoeuvres of the English spies. He thought that chapter of the day's book of adventures closed. It would be an extraordinary piece of luck indeed, if in the end they should still come across the Scarlet Pimpernel. Anyway, for the moment, The most important thing was to see the cartload of prisoners on its way, and to this Rafe devoted his attention. He walked down as far as the cart, saw the prisoners stowed in, Charles Marie on the box with a trooper beside him to see that he did his work properly, another in the cart to watch over the prisoners, and a third to the horses' heads with a lighted lantern. After that, what happened to the pack of miscreants, Rafe cared less than nothing. In the end, they would not escape punishment, whether they reached Mont this night or spent the hours of darkness in the forest. They were securely bound now. Wounded or hale, they lay huddled up in the cart, their spirit broken, and with hardly a groan left in them. I love how the revolutionaries instantly turn on their own friends when anything goes wrong, because they have no honour, you see. With much creaking and grinding, the wheels ploughed their way through the mud. It would take a couple of hours to cover the 3 kilometres back as far as Mont. Rafe stood for a moment or two, watching the veil of darkness which gradually engulfed the cart, the horses, and their human load. Just for a minute longer, the fitful glimmer of the lantern shone through the trees, and for a while the voice of the man who carried it was heard encouraging the horses or urging them on. Then only did Rafe bethink himself of the citizen from Paris who had given him the order to quickly bring the driver of the cart to him. Quickly he turned on his heel and walked up the road again. The corporal and the troopers were there waiting for him, but Citizen Lozay and his friend from Paris had gone. Part 9. Indeed, Chauvelin had not waited to hear the whole of Charles Marie's tale. Throughout all the adventures which had befallen him this day, he had seen the hand of his enemy, the Scarlet Pimpernel. Now he no longer had any doubt. Almost at the first words uttered by Charles Marie, he had jumped to his feet, all the stiffness gone out of his bones, and despite the darkness, the mud, and the rain, he turned and ran up the slushy road, round the bend beyond which he had heard the fight a quarter of an hour ago. To Lozay he had shouted a curt, "Come!" and Lozay had followed, obedient, understanding, like a dog, only vaguely sensing danger to himself, danger more serious than any that had threatened him during this eventful day. Chauvelin ran through the darkness with Lozay at his heels. The road appeared endless and black, the silence full of portent. You don't even have to. You don't have to know what's going on. You just have to really enjoy the frantic feeling of it all. Well, revolutionaries think differently from the rest of us, John. Only the drip from the trees broke the silence. Only the leaden greyness of the close of evening faintly pierced the darkness where the trees grew sparse on the edge of the wood. Despite the cold and rawness of the mist, he was in a bath of perspiration. Though his veins were on fire, his teeth chattered with the cold. Lozay, behind him, was panting like an apoplectic seal. Amazing. The sticky mud clung to the men's shoes. Their limbs, still stiff from hours of confinement, begrudged them every service. Soon Lozay fell with a groan by the roadside. But Chauvelin did not give in. Through the darkness he had perceived things that moved. Through the silence he had heard sounds that spurred him to fresh effort. Stumbling, half-dazed, he went round the bend of the road. Then he, too, fell exhausted by the roadside, exhausted and trembling as with ague. All jelly bones. The scene which greeted his aching eyes had finally unnerved him. There on the crest of the hill he saw 3 horses tethered to neighbouring trees. 3 soldiers with their hats pulled down over their eyes. Of the diligence there was not a sign. Josh, the diligence is the carriage that's going to take the Aristo family to Paris to be, killed. Chauvelin stared and stared at this scene. He had not strength enough to rise, though his every nerve ached to go up to one of those pinioned figures by the trees and to ask what had happened. Thus Raffet found him 5 or 10 minutes later. He came with his soldiers and a lantern or two. On their way they had met with Lauzet and had brought him along with them. Chauvelin could not do more at first than point with trembling fingers straight out before him, and Raffet and the men swinging their lanterns came on the spectacle of the 3 men and the 3 horses tied to the forest trees. The animals calm, as horses are wont to be when nature and men are silent around them. The men inert and half-conscious, smothered under their own hats. They put the guys on their horses, tied them to a tree, and pulled their hats right down over their faces. What is that? That is whimsical in some way. Raffet and his troopers soon released them, but it took them some time to recover their breath. "Question them, citizen captain," Chauvelin commanded feebly. The men's statements, however, were somewhat vague. It seems that after their comrades had gone off, some with their captain, others with the prisoners, the 3 who were left behind busied themselves at first with their horses, examining the saddle girths and so on, when one of them spied something moving underneath the diligence. It was getting dark by that time, the man explained. However, I called to my mates, working class, revolutionary, and we stooped to see what it was. We were very much surprised, you may be sure, to see 2 pairs of feet in ragged shoes. We seized hold of them and pulled. The feet were attached to 2 pairs of legs in tattered stocking and breeches. Finally, there emerged from underneath the diligence 2 ragamuffins with mud up to their eyes and their clothing in rags. We questioned them, the soldier went on to say, and gathered from them that they were just what they appeared to be, 2 young jackanapes who had joined those other hotheads at Mont, where the whole thing was planned, intending to have a little fun. Soon, however, they got scared. Fearing the consequences of their escapade, they had crawled under the diligence, hoping to lie perdu until they could comfortably take to their heels. To be lost, to be, hiding. They were a sorry-looking pair, another soldier put in. We put them down for 2 poltroons, not worth powder and shot, and were just wondering what we should do with them when suddenly, without the slightest warning, they turned on us like a couple of demons. Not they only, for a 3rd fellow seemed to have sprung out of the earth behind us and come to their aid. A giant he was. "A giant?" Raffet exclaimed. "A giant!" For he had suddenly remembered Citizen Chauvelin's warning about the English spy, who was tall above the average. "Aye, a giant with the strength of an ox. I can only speak for myself, but all I know is that in an instant I felt an arm round my throat like a band of steel, and I was hurled to the ground with a man on top of me." It gets very, the language gets very heated around the Pimpernel. I feel like that's not a spoiler. I was held down and bound. My cravat was thrust into my mouth. The next thing I remember was that I was lifted from the ground as if I were a bundle of straw, and I was tied to yonder tree, and finally my hat was pulled down over my eyes. My cravat wound round my mouth so that I just could breathe and no more, and there I remained until you, citizen captain, came and set me free. Also, he smelled really good. Ah, so sexy. And you could tell it wasn't just cologne. He just had a really good smell. The other 2 men had the same tale to tell. All 3 harked on the giant whose size and strength they vowed was supernatural. "He had eyes of flame, citizen," one of them said. "His hair emitted sparks as it stood up around his head," declared another. "The devils," murmured Lauzet with a shudder. "After them!" exclaimed the enthusiastic young captain. "We have 3 horses, and that awkward diligence can't have gotten far." "You haven't looked at the horses, have you, citizen Raffet?" Chauvelin remarked dryly. There's nothing wrong with them, is there? Rafe retorted and turned to look at the animals. The next moment, a savage oath broke from his lips. Fuck! The saddles! He exclaimed. They're gone! And the bridles too, I think, Chauvelin retorted slowly. Unless some of you are circus riders, I don't quite see what you can do. But you do not suppose, citizen captain, that those English devils would leave you the means of running after them, did you? No one said anything for the moment. There was indeed nothing to say. Reproaches and vituperations would come later. Punishment too, perhaps. The soldiers and their captain hung their heads, brooding and ashamed. They have a good start, curse 'em. Lozé muttered presently. What could we do against those limbs of Satan? Rafe rejoined glumly. You should have stayed, citizen captain, to guard the coach, Chauvelin retorted with a snarl. We heard you call for help, citizen, Rafe protested glumly, and one man told us what a plight you were in. We thought you were being attacked by the English spies, murdered perhaps. It was our duty to come to your assistance. Indeed, it was a sense of fatality that had fallen over these men. They felt numb, unable to think, hardly able to move. Epinay is not more than 4 kilometers, citizen, Rafe at last ventured, and we have the lanterns. I don't know how to pronounce it in French. I'm just not going to. And so the procession started trudging down the incline in the darkness and the rain. Chauvelin and Lozé, Rafe and his corporal, with a couple of troopers carrying the lanterns. 2 hours later, they reached Epinay, hungry, tired, spattered with mud up to their chins. Nothing had been seen or heard of the diligence on the way. At the posting inn, the party found Rafe's courier waiting for them. He had been perplexed at not finding anyone to whom he could deliver the message, but whiled away the time of waiting in the coffee room, where mine host plied him with excellent wine, which had the effect of loosening his tongue. He thought he was doing no harm by recounting at full length the adventures that had befallen him and his comrades. Thus the story was all over the district by the time the labourers of Epinay had gone to work the following morning, and the chief of section in the department of Seine-et-Oise, citizen Lozé, became the laughing-stock of the countryside, together with his wonderful friend from Paris. Late that same day, a horseless diligence, which at first appeared deserted and derelict, was discovered 6 kilometres to the north of the forest of Mézières. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, in the mud of the stream that runs southward into the Seine. A group of labourers going to their work were the first to see it. It had been dragged into the stream and left axle deep in the water behind a clump of tall reeds. The labourers reported their find to a patrol of Rafe's troopers, whom he had sent out to scour the countryside. The wheels had sunk deep into the mire, and it was only after a great deal of exertion that labourers and soldiers together succeeded in dragging the coach over the flat bank upon firm land. In the interior, they found 3 saddles and bridles and 2 pairs of ragged shoes. Truly, fate has been against us, Lozé sighed dolefully when he heard of the find. Satan alone knows where the English spies and the prisoners are at this hour. On their way to England, Chauvelin remarked. It doesn't say that he did it in that tone, but I think he probably did. I know 'em. With their long purse and their impudence, they'll work their way to the coast, aided by fools and traitors. Such fools and traitors, he added under his breath, as helped them last night in their latest adventure. Yeah. I mean, maybe the guillotine's a little bit far, but taking all of their shit is definitely justified. Little Madeleine de Sèze was very shy. This is the daughter of the family. She had been brought by her father to pay her respects to Monseigneur le Prince de Galles. because Maman was too ill to accompany her. This is the French. This is the French way of saying the Prince of Wales, the Blackadder Prince of Wales, George IV, as he would become. His Royal Highness had the child beside him on the sofa, and was questioning her about her adventures on that awful day when she and Papa and Maman were being taken to Paris in the diligence, and believed that they were destined to perish on the guillotine. "I don't remember much, Monseigneur," Madeleine said shyly. "Maman and I were too frightened to notice anything. There was so much shouting and fighting. It was terrible. It was like what poor people experience. It was so gross." "Shall I tell you what happened, little one?" His Royal Highness was pleased to say. "Your Highness, steaming punch is served in the yellow drawing-room," a pleasant voice interposed, with the assurance of privilege. "Fie, Sir Percy!" exclaimed Lady Alicia Nugget. "Would you spoil his Highness's story?" "Rather that than let good punch spoil with cooling, dear lady," Sir Percy retorted with a smile. "Seize him and garrote him," his Highness broke in with a laugh, as our gallant hero and his friends seized and garroted a chief of section, whatever that may be, and his powerful friend from Paris. I think garroting must mean something non-lethal, because otherwise this is a ghost story. "Seize him! Garrote him!" cried many a pair of charmingly rouged lips. The next moment Sir Percy Blakeney, that prince of dandies, saw himself fettered by a number of lovely arms, while gay voices, chirruping like birds, cried, "The story, your Highness, we entreat. He cannot interrupt now." Ugh, all of these people telling their stories, fucking around, drinking steaming punch. Honestly. "I have the story from one who knows," His Highness resumed with a smile, "and our little friend Madeleine shall hear it. It was thus. Our gallant Scarlet Pimpernel, in one of his happiest disguises as a drover from Ancourt, did, with the aid of two of his followers, egg on a number of young louts into the belief that they were being cheated out of the reward due to them for the capture of the noted English adventurers in their district. Full of enthusiasm and excellent wine, they came upon the chief of section, who, I imagine, answers to our chief constable of a county, together with a gentleman from Paris whom some of us have known in the past. Well, the young louts, eager for the fray, and always egged on by the drover from Ancourt, seized and garroted those two worthy gentlemen, and throwing them into the cart, took them along with him. In the forest of Mézières they came upon the diligence, in which were our little friend Madeleine and her parents. The vehicle was ostensibly guarded by 4 troopers only, but our Scarlet Pimpernel and his friends had already ascertained that, as a matter of fact, there were half a dozen more men inside the coach, and that all were armed to the teeth. Altogether too many for 3 men to tackle. And since the chief motto of our band of heroes is never to attempt where they cannot succeed, stratagem had here to come to the aid of valor. I like the idea of never attempting what you can't succeed. I suppose when it's stealing aristos from revolutionary France, it's just good policy. "And what did they do?" one of the ladies queried breathlessly. "The driver from Ancourt, our gallant and sexy Scarlet Pimpernel," His Highness replied, "brought the cart to a standstill about a quarter of a mile from the crest of the hill where the diligence had come to a halt, prepared for an attack. Then he allowed the louts to rush the vehicle, and a general melee ensued. But he and his 2 followers, in the meanwhile, lifted the chief of section and his friend out of the cart and carried them up the road to a point from which their call for help would presently be heard. Here they left them in the ditch, but carefully took the gags from their mouths. Immediately the two worthy gentlemen started to shout. Nor could they be blamed, for their plight was indeed pitiable. At first there was so much din in the melee at the top of the hill that their cries could not be heard. And in the meanwhile, one of our gallant heroes, our handsome, strong, muscular boys, had crept to the top of the hill, through the thicket to the crest of the hill. Then presently the fighting ceased. The enthusiastic captain of gendarmerie heard the cries for help, accompanied by a good deal of shouting and a clash of metal carried on by the Scarlet Pimpernel himself and his second follower. Now, do you see what was the result of this manoeuvre? No, no, the ladies exclaimed. Oh, our stupid feather brains! And the men, no less enthusiastic and interested, cried, Will your highness proceed? Oh, garrotte used to mean generally strangled or being restrained by a collar. That makes everything make a lot more sense. Thank you. The prisoners let out the secret that the chief of section and his friend were lying bound with ropes in a ditch, whilst one of your heroes, the one who had gone back to the scene of the fight and mingled with the crowd, was able to put in a word that no doubt those two great and worthy citizens were being attacked and murdered by the English spies. The English spies, you have no conception, ladies, what magic lies in those 3 words for every soldier in the Republic. They mean hopes of promotion and of big monetary reward. In an instant, the enthusiastic captain had called to some of his men to follow him, to go to the rescue of their chief of section, and incidentally to capture the Scarlet Pimpernel. And that was the immediate outcome of the clever stratagem. The captain divided his forces. 3 he took with him, 2 were left to bring the prisoners along, another had been sent as a courier with a message. 3 only were left to guard the diligence. The gallant Scarlet Pimpernel, the incredibly sexy smelling, always looks a little tousled like he just got out of bed, Scarlet Pimpernel had made a clever calculation. Already by a small ruse he had rid himself of the cart. Under cover of the darkness, his 2 equally gallant and handsome followers had crept underneath the vehicle, whilst he waited in the thicket for the right time to strike. I leave you to guess the rest. The 3 remaining soldiers taken unawares, the horses unsaddled, the diligence finally driven down the hill by our hero, whilst inside the coach his 2 followers were doing their best to assure little Madeleine and her parents that all was well. Soon they abandoned the cumbersome diligence and took to the road. That part of the story is perhaps less exciting, though no less heroic. The Scarlet Pimpernel has 19 followers. It was their task to be on the road, to aid the fugitives with disguises, to help in the great task of reaching the coach in safety. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the story, His Highness concluded, rising. Let us go and drink some of my friend Blakeney's excellent punch. But after we have drunk our toast to the king, let us raise our glasses to our national erotic hero, the Scarlet Pimpernel. With a courtly bow and a smile, he offered his arm to Marguerite Blakeney, who, with a glistening tear in her beautiful eyes, gave His Highness a glance of gratitude. Are you coming, Blakeney? The prince said with a merry laugh. Ha 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 ha! You must drink our toast too, remember? To the gallant Scarlet Pimpernel. All the ladies laughed, partly with gaiety, but also with excitement. Then with one accord they cried, Come and drink, Sir Percy, to the gallant Scarlet Pimpernel. I'll come, dear ladies, Sir Percy said with a sigh, since His Highness commands. But if you'll forgive me if I cannot drink to that demmed elusive shadow. Laughing still, the ladies cried, Fie, Sir Percy! Jealous again? And little Madeleine, with her great childish gaze fixed upon the handsome English gentleman, cried in her piping little voice, Fie, Sir Percy! The end of the story, which was called Fie, Sir Percy. Nice. Aristophone. And everyone is just so horny for the Scarlet Pimpernel. It's crazy. But yeah, thank you everybody for being here. It's later than I usually do these, so thanks for coming. Thanks for attending. I have D&D tomorrow, so there probably won't be a reading unless it's before 4 o'clock. Was it autocorrect? Was it? The Scarlet Pimpernel's descriptions were pretty exciting. I added a few words. I'm not sure if you could tell where, but I felt like they were implied. Okay, now I am going back to totally failing to play Kingdom Come Deliverance. Can't find these fucking marigolds in the dark. I need 10 of them, or my character's brother will bleed to death. So there's a time limit. Really annoying. But yeah, thank you for watching. I'll see you maybe tomorrow, probably Sunday. And have a good weekend. Look after each other. Or don't. It is up to you. Also, Lee 1L, I don't know how to pronounce his name, but the guy who made the Saw movies is how he's most commonly known to me. Liked my tweet about jacking off all my cousins. So that's something really cool that I can say to a friend next time we watch a film. That guy laughed at the idea of me jacking off all my cousins. things we have to be thankful for in 2021. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye. See you tomorrow or the next day.